Let's be clear, the 16th century wasn't built for free minds. It was built to control them. Back then, truth wasn't praised. It was feared. It was hunted. It was burned. And one man dared to speak it anyway. His name was Giordano Bruno. He believed the universe had no edge, that stars were suns, that God wasn't a king in the sky, but a force living in everything. And he believed something even more dangerous, that no man, no pope, no priest, no inquisitor had the right to silence the human mind. For that, they tied him to a stake and lit the fire. But the moment they did, they made him eternal. He was born Filippo Bruno in the hills of southern Italy, a place beautiful in nature but blind in thought. While other boys played or prayed, he questioned, he observed. He saw what others ignored. He didn't want to be told who God was. He wanted to find him. At 17, he entered the Dominican convent, but not for faith, for access to knowledge, forbidden texts, and secrets locked away by those too afraid to face them. He adopted the name Giordano and dropped the mask. Inside those stone walls, he tore open the doctrines. He refused to repeat what was spoon-fed. He read Erasmus. He studied Copernicus. He challenged Aristotle. He questioned the Trinity. He saw the worship of saints as idolatry. He didn't want a universe designed by dogma. He wanted one ruled by reason. He said God wasn't distant. God was everything, in the fire, in the stars, in every grain of dust. He refused to be silent. While others protected themselves, he made war with ignorance. He fled the convent, not as a coward, but as a man who had just broken his chains. For the next 16 years, he roamed Europe, not as a fugitive, but as a flame spreading from mind to mind. In Paris, London, Geneva, and Germany, he debated kings and scholars. He won enemies by telling the truth too loudly. He lost allies by refusing to bow, but he never stopped speaking. That's what makes a man unstoppable. Not muscle, not weapons, but the refusal to kneel. He said the universe wasn't just heliocentric, it was limitless. Other worlds circled them and other forms of life could exist. That labeled that type of thinking heresy, because if Earth wasn't the center, neither was the church. They called it arrogance, but it wasn't. It was vision, the kind only few can handle. He didn't speak to control. He spoke to awaken, and the world wasn't ready. Bruno called out religious corruption. He saw dogma as a cage. He preached independence of mind. He wrote books like On the Infinite Universe and Worlds, declaring truths so dangerous they echoed through time. But the closer he got to truth, the closer he came to the fire. Because here's the rule. Every system protects itself. And the Catholic Church was the most powerful system on earth. When they couldn't debate him, they hunted him. When they couldn't silence him, they promised him safety. He returned to Italy, and they slammed the cage shut. He was arrested, dragged before the Inquisition, accused of heresy. But the real crime? Thinking too much. They offered him forgiveness. If he just said 2 words, I recant. He refused, again and again. He would rather burn alive than betray the truth he had seen. That isn't stubbornness, that's power. That's the kind of man who becomes legend. The church had all the fire, but Bruno had something greater. Conviction. And conviction doesn't burn. For 8 years, they tried to break him. Not just physically, mentally. Isolation, interrogation, psychological torture. But Bruno wasn't built like them. He was a weapon disguised as a philosopher. When asked if he feared the sentence, he said, You pronounce this sentence with greater fear than I receive it. Let that echo, because that wasn't defiance. That was domination. In that moment, he became untouchable. February 17th, 1600, Campo de Fiori, Rome. They marched him to the stake, gagged him to stop his final words, tied him up, lit the flames, but they didn't kill a man. They created a myth. Today, his statue stands tall, and at the very spot where they burned him, he doesn't look down in peace. He stares in defiance. Because Bruno was never just a thinker. He was a warning to every empire, every church, every system that fears free thought. He proved this. Truth needs no approval, and freedom of thought is the ultimate rebellion. But what made him so rare? It wasn't just what he believed. It was how he thought. He mastered ancient memory systems. He built mental palaces that made kings stare in disbelief. He connected disciplines like no one before him: astronomy, theology, article science. He didn't just learn, he synthesized. He created frameworks that blurred the line between science and spirit. He used metaphor like a scalpel, cutting into the mind of anyone who listened. And yet, he was hated, feared, isolated. Why? Because the masses don't fear evil. They fear uncontrollable truth. Most people don't want to be free. They want comfort. They want safety. They want rules. Bruno offered none of that. He offered reality, raw, wild, dangerous. And when a man becomes that free, the world conspires to cage him. So what does this mean for you? It means that speaking the truth comes with a price. Not the kind you pay in gold, but in blood, in reputation, in isolation. Because the moment you stop repeating what they taught you, the moment you start thinking for yourself, you'll see who's really listening and who's ready to silence you. The freer your mind becomes, the more the world will call you reckless. The more clarity you gain, the more they'll label you dangerous. You'll lose friends. You'll be misunderstood. You'll be mocked, not because you're wrong, but because your vision exposes their blindness. And when you speak, they'll call you arrogant. When you stand firm, they'll call you difficult. But that's the test. And it's one Bruno passed with fire in his eyes. Because the truth isn't supposed to make you comfortable. It's supposed to set fire to the lies.